Hello again. We are Chris Lee, Blake Lovell, and Max Barr of Southeastern 14 here to preview three SEC basketball games for Wednesday night. That is Missouri traveling to Florida, South Carolina going to Texas A&M, and the last one is Alabama visiting Ole Miss. We will break all those down in the order of tip-off, which we just mentioned. Before we get into the games, we remind you we are brought to you by BetOnline, which is your number one source for all your basketball wagering needs, including pro and college hoops throughout the year. With up-to-the-minute odds, stats, and trends, you can follow your favorite team's path to the playoff with live in-game betting contests and all the best player props. Experience the world's best wagering platform anytime from your desktop or mobile devices. Head to BetOnline today. Become part of the team. Remember to use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline. The game starts here. All right, the game start in Gainesville, 5:30 Central. Missouri travels to Florida. Florida is going to be a big favorite in this one. Let me pull up Ken Palm and tell you exactly what that will probably look like. Missouri favored by 15 in Ken Palm. I presume Bart Torvik is similar. I'm not going to sit here and give you 10 minutes of why Missouri can beat Florida. It is an uphill climb. Florida, one of the more consistent teams in the league. Missouri also one of the more consistent teams in the league. It has lost every SEC game. Now, I think Sean East being back, scoring 33 against Arkansas, tells you they got a dude who can have a game that would be required in one of these upsets. Tamar Bates has also taken his turn in the scoring lead, but Missouri really limited offensively other than that. On the other hand, Florida is not. Gentlemen, I'm just going to cut to the chase and give you my pick. It's Florida, and it's easy. And if you got a reason why I'm wrong, let me know.
Blake, this is one of your clients' performances here. Would you like to step in quick?
Yeah, I got a lot to say. Chris took a couple jabs at the Tigers in there.
I knew
That's okay. We're noting that, and my client's taking note for the revenge tour in 2025. But this is what I like to call a look-ahead game for Missouri, because they're looking ahead to the next game, which is the last chance they got to win one in the SEC play. So, because of that, not because of Florida, being a great team or anything. It's just Missouri's looking ahead to Ole Miss on Saturday, because they're trying to figure out, hey, this is our best chance at a victory on Saturday. The look ahead game here. I don't. My only thing would be, if I were Missouri, I'd request a trade here. I'd request a trade for the opponents. Can we trade Florida for anybody else? Maybe not anybody. Can we trade Florida for like one of the bottom couple teams? That'd be nice at this rate. But I don't think you can do that. Although, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it'd be okay. But yeah, I mean,
The stalling here is amazing.
it's really hard to pick against my client yet again. But I think I will go with the Florida Gators, who seem to be playing a little bit better basketball right now than the Missouri Tigers, who have been consistent. Not in the way the jab that Chris took at them. They've been consistent in that they've been right there in
That's
a
true.
lot of these. In any game that Sean East has played in, Missouri has been there at some point in the game, like late into the game. If you really think about it, like that's what's probably even more frustrating. It's not that they're just going and getting blown out every game. It's that in every game that Sean East has played in, there have at least been times in the second half where like it's a close game, and they just don't have that. They don't have those two missing pieces that we thought they would have to maybe help them get over the hump in some of these games. And so, yeah, come on, I'm picking the Gators here.
Florida just provides a tough matchup for Missouri with all their size. It's just it's same thing with a team like Vanderbilt down in the bottom half of the SEC. When they play Florida, it's just tough because Florida's just got 6'10" monster after 6'10" monster. But what I will say is I think it was just last week, but I remember tweeting about it from our account, and it was that there was like a streak of 3 or 4 double-digit SEC underdogs that were winning at halftime. It was like Missouri against Tennessee, and a few others during that week when they played. But there's just something about being a double-digit underdog in the SEC and you're winning at halftime, and we're texting each other, wait a second, is this going to happen? And then Blake texts us back, no, this team wins by 12 plus. I feel like we might get that here, but it's just a tough matchup with how Florida sized matches up. I'm going Florida.
Next up, South Carolina visits Texas A&M. Boy, Texas A&M. Let's go back to February the 10th. A&M had just beaten Tennessee, 3 straight wins. That includes Florida. We're going, okay, this team has finally gotten it together. It then goes to Vanderbilt, gets beat at the buzzer, and the bottom has fallen out. A blowout loss on the road to Alabama, a home loss to Arkansas, and then a blowout in the revenge tour in Food City Arena against Tennessee. South Carolina, on the other hand, we have been sitting here all year going, hey, the predicted computers tell us this team is not as good as its record. And then when it went and got its doors blown off at Auburn, and it did not rebound and got beaten by LSU in Columbia in a game that went down to the buzzer, that was a thing that could have rocked the Gamecocks' confidence. But Carolina is led by Lamont Paris. And boy, we got a lot of good stuff to say about Lamont Paris. He took this team to Oxford, where not a lot of teams are winning this year. And he not only won, he won it by 13 points. This feels predictable. This feels like this should be a spot where Carolina can go and win in College Station. A little pressure mounting on Buzz Williams. Carolina really just needs to win another game or two to sleep very comfortably about its NCAA tournament fortunes. Might be there anyway. I don't think Carolina can lose out and be there. Meanwhile, A&M's got a lot to play for, guys. And we've seen the unpredictability of these games. This one is not easy. Max, give me what stands out to you here.
It's a great segue. This one is not easy. This is a tough game to break down. Falls into that road ranked team at a home unranked team, if you want to look at it from a betting angle. But man, these styles are very interesting. You kind of have that South Carolina defense that really just keeps everything in front and forces you into those tough mid-range twos. But if there's any team that has 2 guards that just kind of live in that area, live in that one-on-one isolation, try to beat your man one-on-one off the ball, it's Wade Taylor and Tyrese Radford. So that, what good would forcing Tyrese Radford into mid-range floaters be? I think that's kind of where he wants to live. But then on the flip side, you have a South Carolina offense that does not get to the free throw line. They actually get to the free throw line at the lowest rate in the SEC. But what they do a really good job of is getting quality looks and offensive rebounding the ball. Offensive rebounding in the top 5 rate in the SEC. Well, the Texas A&M defense doesn't let you do that. So, like, on both sides, you have contrasting styles that it makes for an interesting game. But the number one thing that I'm kind of looking for is, can Texas A&M run efficient offense at home and take care of the ball? Because this is a South Carolina defense that's not going to turn you over. They're just going to force you into really tough shots and contest. That could go one of 2 ways with Wade Taylor and Tyrese Radford. I feel like it's kind of going to come down to who's making shots this game. It sounds like a cop-out from an analyst standpoint, but I think it's as simple as that. Who's going to make the tough shots here?
Yeah. We talked about 46-43, Tennessee and Auburn last year in Knoxville. I think the percentage of this game being 46-43 is higher than any we've seen in a while. And that's not a knock on either team. It's just when you think about how both play, I think you're absolutely going to get a grinded-out game here where the defenses are going to control how this game is played. And then it's like those couple little things that Max has mentioned. It's like, all right, A&M's best attribute is offensive rebounding. Well, South Carolina is really good at preventing offensive rebounds.
Yep.
Bully ball inside. So if they stop A&M from getting those second chance opportunities, which is not going to be easy because I don't know if anyone's been able to do it really. is A&M going to be able to score enough points if they don't get those second chance opportunities? Because the numbers tell us they're not going to make enough shots anywhere else on the floor unless they just get easy shots. They've not done it consistently. Is this going to be the game where they hit whatever 11 threes that they hit against Tennessee? I just don't think so. But they could, I guess. But the percentages tell you that's not going to happen. And then it's like, all right, well, on the other side, it's okay, A&M, they're still going to play some pretty good defense. I mean, we've seen South Carolina be a little up and down offensively. There are some times where they struggle to score a little bit. So, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? A&M's bread and butter is getting to the free throw line. How this game is called will make a huge difference because South Carolina, as we have always said, is aggressive. They're physical. And if they're getting called for every little touch, then A&M's going to shoot 35 free throws in this game, which is probably exactly what they want. But if it's a game where, the officials are letting them play and it's just a physical basketball game, then I think you're absolutely going to see this be a grind for both of these teams to find consistent offense. But yeah, so this is, it's an interesting setup here. A&M, as of this morning, we're only mentioning, I know everyone kind of just loses it sometimes when we say the name Joe Lunardi, but we're just saying it because this is what you're going to see on the broadcast. Like, okay, so we're just using him as the example here. But he's the one that gets mentioned with bracketology, so we're going to say this. A&M, the first team out as of this morning. We're recording this on Tuesday. They are the first team out of the field in his bracket. Ole Miss, by the way, is way back there now. They're in the danger zone. Call Kenny Loggins because they are in the danger zone. Because now you go into this game, and I'm going to disagree with Chris on one thing. I think South Carolina, which I would never disagree with Chris on anything, but I think if South Carolina loses out, they're still in. I think maybe they're a 9-10 seed or something, but they're still in the field if they lose out. Don't try me on that, South Carolina, but at A&M, home against Florida, home against Tennessee, at Mississippi State. 3 of those teams are NCAA tournament locks, most likely. 1 is the first team out of the field. So those aren't, even if they lose them all, they're not going to just destroy South Carolina's resume by any means. So, but we'll see what happens in this one. This is it's a fascinating game, even if it may not be the most, this isn't going to be Alabama, Florida, Alabama, Kentucky by any means.
Our man Blake may be invisible at times, but that doesn't mean he's always wrong. I'd not checked. South Carolina's got Florida, Tennessee, and at Mississippi State. So none of those, although 2 at home, are things that would really kill Carolina. No bad loss opportunities, I guess is a good way to say it. And A&M's not a bad loss opportunity too. So really, I think Carolina, I don't know if playing with house money is strong enough. There's so many other variables with other teams. Somebody could sneak some wins. Some teams could creep off the bubble and go in line. But I think Carolina is 7 in bracket matrix as of this morning. That's a whole lot of rambling before I get to the prediction. Look, A&M keeps possession of the ball. One way it keeps possession of the ball is it doesn't turn it over. Carolina doesn't really force turnovers anyway. So that's kind of a non-factor here. The rebounding thing Blake talked about. A&M number 1 in the conference in conference games at getting offensive rebounds. Carolina number 2 at preventing them. The three-point shooting, that's one thing Carolina has been able to do at times, is take teams out of their games. Not really a factor for A&M. It hasn't really shot the ball from 3 except against Tennessee. So there's a lot of things here where Carolina's good at neutralizing things that A&M doesn't really do well. So I don't know what to make of all the stats. I'm just going to go with the gut feeling. This is a gritty, grinded-out game. South Carolina's not been perfect in that scenario. You saw that against LSU. But I just trust this team to win more right now. We've seen Tennessee win in Knoxville. If you win in Knoxville, you can win anywhere. Not sure about it, but give me the Gamecocks.
Interesting. So with this game, I feel like it's going to be one of those games when you're watching it, and if a team goes up by like 4 or 6, you feel like that's a double-digit lead. I feel like that's going to kind of be the kind of game this is. And who do I trust more to just get out to a 4, maybe even just like a 5-point lead and just kind of play their pace, play their game? And for me, that's Lamont Paris and what they've been able to do on the road. So since I like South Carolina in this game, I'm going to pick Texas A&M.
Yeah. I knew you were going to do that.
I love what you
Oh,
just
I
did
knew it.
there. You just backed him into a corner.
You did not at all. Because let me tell you right now, we talked about the NCAA tournament, all this other stuff. The Lamont lock is officially on when it comes to the tournament for the Gamecocks. And at least one of you, actually I think both of you, have learned your lesson from the last time around. When the South Carolina Gamecocks went to Oxford, and you two were all in on the Rebels.
What?
Who now have sort of, yeah, you were all in, Max. I think you said 30-point victory, something like that, from what I can recall. But now you've got a very interesting scenario here because South Carolina just went to Ole Miss, the team that desperately needed a home win to keep its NCAA tournament conversation going, to stay in the hunt. A&M is in the same situation. First team out, second team out, first team, last team in. They're right there on that line right now for a lot of people. And so, who do you trust? Who do you love? I love my father, Lamont Paris. And the Gamecocks hit the road to play the Aggies, and stylistically, I just think this is the kind of game that South Carolina absolutely wants. They want this kind of game against Texas A&M. And again, play the percentages, right? One thing would tell you, okay, play the percentages and take the home team. But there is such something about this Texas A&M team to where even though this is going to be their Super Bowl, because this is the biggest game of the season for them now, based on where they're at in the tournament, they've lost 4 in a row. I just do not think you can trust them at all offensively, and now you're telling me to trust them against the team that defensively has just completely grinded people into oblivion this year. And so I can't do it. I cannot trust Texas A&M, especially a Texas. You're telling me to trust a Texas A&M team that is on a 4-game losing streak, which has included losses at Vanderbilt, at home against Arkansas, a 25-point loss at Alabama, a 35-point loss at Tennessee. Now, the way this season's gone, Texas A&M's got them right where they want them. I mean, a 4-game losing streak, getting blown out, losing to a couple teams that are at the bottom of the rankings. Great. This is exactly the setup you want if you're Buzz Williams. But I can't do it. I can't predict it. So that's not my pick. I'm taking the Gamecocks on the road in College Station.
I like the who do you love. I thought you were going to bust out into George Thorogood there for a minute.
Who do you love?
Who do you love? Like that song. All right, Max, what do we got next?
We got one more left. A great
Alabama,
game,
Ole Miss.
Great
I can't
game.
read my writing.
This is going to test me here.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of backs against the wall,
Oof.
I'm not going to say Ole Miss has to have this one or it's got no chance.
Yeah.
Because
No, I
let's see,
they
at
do,
Missouri.
Chris.
Well, I don't know. At Missouri, at Georgia,
They gotta have
Texas
this one.
A&M.
I will say it for you. Ole Miss has
Right.
got to have this one.
Okay, I strike that from the record, Judge Judy. Ole Miss has got to have this one. Question is, can Ole Miss get this one? Max, I'll let you start here.
Well, we've been talking about it, and I hate to just lean on an injury. But when you're looking at paths to victory, you got to cover all your angles. And Nate Oates said again today, or it might have been yesterday, but he said again how much they miss Latrell Wrightsell and kind of went into depth into it. I'm not going to go through everything he said, but just kind of went over how much Wrightsell brings to the team and how important he is. So if there's ever a good time to catch Alabama, it probably isn't when they're going to be pissed off coming off of a prime time loss, when they're in a bounce back spot. Probably not the best time to catch them. You'd probably want to catch them where Kentucky did, coming off of an overtime win. So you're gonna catch a pissed off team, but you are catching them in their second straight road game now, and they're shorthanded. When you look at the numbers and the matchups, we've been talking about the Ole Miss defense and how they haven't lived up to what we thought they would be, and everyone knows that Alabama's, got the ability to put up 100 plus any night. So when you look at the Alabama offense versus the Ole Miss defense, maybe Ole Miss is going to be able to block a bunch of shots, and Alabama has a rough shooting night on the road. We've been talking about the turnovers. If there's one thing that Matt Morrell and Alan Flanagan can impact the game with, it's forcing some turnovers. I believe Morrell had like a 10-steal game earlier in the year. So you can see some areas there, but pretty much all the numbers are going to tell you that Alabama is just going to do one of those. We may not get many stops, but we'll outscore you type of games. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting from this one. How about you, Blake?
Well, just real quickly, because I had this stat pulled up and I forgot to mention it, in the middle of my promo for the South Carolina-Texas A&M game. But did you guys realize that, and this is one of those weird things, like I don't know that I would have put this together and thought this was the case, that South Carolina has beaten Texas A&M 8 of the last 10 times. They've won 3 straight in College Station. It just doesn't compute for me because I feel like Texas A&M's been better than South Carolina over the past, right? Like, towards the end of the Frank Martin tenure, South Carolina was struggling. It's just one of those weird things, but I just
makes me like A&M even more.
Well, probably. I mean, you're probably right about that. So, all right. As for this game, the Super Bowl for Ole Miss. We got 2 Super Bowls here. This is a very important evening for these 2 teams. And yes, as we said, this is as must-win as it gets for Ole Miss. They don't win this one, they're going to have to go into the SEC tournament needing multiple wins, I think, to even get right there on that line. So, I mean, it's like what stands out in this game? It is Alabama's defense that just gave up 117 at Kentucky. Are they going to come out with the mindset that, all right, we just got embarrassed in Lexington? Everybody's talking about, giving up 117 and all this. Even your coaches called you out, not playing defense, all this. Does Alabama come out with something to prove here and have one of their better defensive games of the season? That's question number 1. It's like question number 2. This is an Ole Miss team that, as Max has said, they've struggled here recently. I mean, they're losing by double digits to good teams. And before that, it was like, okay, you looked up and you're like, all right, they beat Florida earlier in the year before Florida kind of got on their run. There were some other games. They won the game at A&M. They beat Mississippi State. Like, okay, they're starting to find some momentum here. But since then, it's not happened outside of that stretch where they played well in the back half of the South Carolina game in Columbia. But like all they had to show for it over the past in February, all they have to show for it is a 3-point win against Missouri, which was just clawing to try to get that over the winless team. So now you're asking them to go out and play the best offensive team they played this season and, defend to the level that, quite frankly, they've not defended to because, Chris Beard's thing is defense, but they're nowhere near where he wants them to be defensively, and we all know that. And that's probably one of the reasons why, that great start has turned into, 19-8 is because they've been better than we thought offensively, but they've probably been a little fairly worse than we thought defensively. Yeah. And so like it's like, what do you do with that? Because it's like, it'd be different if they had held serve at home to this point, right? But they haven't now. They've lost by 14 to Auburn. They lost by 13 at home to South Carolina. So, like, to me, there's not a lot to look at here and feel great about Ole Miss's, matchup, because I just think a lot of the things that weeks ago we were like, okay, feeling good about Ole Miss. They seem to be a team that's built some trends. They're going to struggle on the road, but, man, they're still tough to beat at home. And, they're getting better here or getting better there. It just hasn't translated in this stretch where they have just played better teams. So, yeah, tough matchup.
Predictions. All right. I'm looking at the KenPom page for this matchup, and when Ole Miss has got the ball, it's a little bit of a stalemate. I kid Blake about Alabama's defense. Alabama's not an awful defensive team. I mean, it is sometimes, but on the whole, it's okay. Alabama ranks 7th in conference in offense. In defense. Ole Miss ranks 7 in offense. I look at that side of the matchup and, okay, nothing really stands out. Like if Ole Miss had a big offensive game and hit a bunch of threes, wouldn't shock me, but Alabama's actually okay at defending the 3. So I don't really look at that end of the floor and take a lot from it. But boy, the other end of the floor. And this is where Blake hit on some things that got me to thinking. I've said all along, wait till mid-February, and then I'll start making judgments on teams. And here we are. And Ole Miss is not playing well in mid-February. And it doesn't intuitively make sense to me that Ole Miss is not a better defensive team. And, oh, by the way, before I forget, Alan Flanagan is going to be available for this one in case people wondered about that. He got ejected from the last game for throwing an elbow. He will be back for this one. I don't think it's going to matter. Ole Miss is 11 on defense in the conference, giving up almost 113 points per 100 possessions. Alabama scoring almost 120 points per 100 possessions. But it gets worse when you look inside it, okay? Alabama is number 2 at shooting the 3. Ole Miss next to worst at defending it. Alabama's number 1 at shooting the 2. Ole Miss is 10th at defending it. And this is where it could even get worse for Ole Miss. This is where I don't at some point basketball statisticians are going to maybe start factoring luck into it. Alabama, the number 2 free throw shooting team in league play, 80.3%. Ole Miss is giving up 69% at the line. So Ole Miss's defense could be actually worse if teams hit foul shots at probably than their normal clip. It is a complete mismatch on that side of the ball. I don't understand why Chris Beard's teams, with Chris Beard as the coach, he's a defensive whiz, and that size inside hasn't translated more. It just hasn't. It's a mismatch when Alabama's got the ball, and that's going to take precedent in Oxford. Give me Alabama.
Yeah, I think that there is some weight to right cell not being there, but when you talk about why the defense hasn't really panned out even with Cisse and Sharp, and well, one is Sharp has struggled with the physicality of the SEC. This is a game that maybe he could play some extended minutes as Alabama doesn't really have a big bruiser down low. But what I'm worried about is who's guarding Mark Sears. You know, who at point guard for Ole Miss is going to be able to stop Mark Sears. And it's a tough matchup because you get Alabama coming off of the embarrassment, really. I mean, it's one way to just lose on the road against a good team. You lose, you come back. Okay, everybody loses on the road. But to really be embarrassed in prime time, teams just come back with an extra burst, with an extra revenge, want to write our name. And so I'm going to go with Alabama here. I bet the spread is somewhere around 6 to 8 for Alabama, multiple possessions. The thing with Ole Miss, in their biggest wins at home, they beat Mississippi State, put up 86. They beat Florida, put up 103. In their losses, Kentucky, they put up 63. South Carolina last game, 59. They're going to have to get 85 plus if they want to win this game. And I have a hard time believing that they're going to be able to stop Alabama. I'm going Alabama.
Let me tell you who's nervous right now. Big Baller Brett. Because Big Baller Brett is sitting and watching this, and he's thinking, oh my, what should I do here? It's not just Big Baller Brett. There's other people out there, other Alabama fans that are watching this thinking, oh boy, what's about to unfold here with the third pick in the Southeastern 14 SEC basketball predictions draft. Watch the stats here, and these really pop out at you. Ole Miss against the best offensive teams they played in the SEC. Would you say that if you take out the Florida game, which before Florida went on their run, it was over a month and a half ago now, all right, would you say that Tennessee, Auburn, Kentucky qualify as probably the next best offensive teams?
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So if you go back to January 6th, Ole Miss against Tennessee. Tennessee shot 55% from 2. They shot 37% from 3, which included 11 threes in that game. All right. Auburn, January 20th. Auburn shot 65% from 2, 44% from 3. Auburn shot 44% from 3. The next Auburn game, February 3rd. Auburn shot 62% from 2, 44% from 3. 12 threes from Auburn in that game. Kentucky, February 13th. Kentucky shot 61.1% from 2, 33% from 3. That was kind of one of those weird things where it's like, okay, Kentucky only shot, 18 threes, only put up 18, only shot 33%. All right, okay, well, good job, Ole Miss, right? Good work. But it's like Kentucky still shot 61% from 2. And so when you look at the trend here against good teams, Ole Miss has just given up easy percentages, basically, to all the good offensive teams. Minus, like we said, Florida was in a different spot. But even then, Florida, 45% from 2. But that was it's probably Ole Miss's best performance of the season. Wouldn't we say that? They won 103-85 in that game. And so it's just not been there consistently. And even the 3-point, remember, we were leaning on Ole Miss's 3-point percentage all year long. And it's still 18th nationally. But if you look at the recent numbers, right? 3 of 16 against South Carolina, 19%. 6 of 19 against Mississippi State, 32%. They did have the good shooting performance against Missouri, but we're throwing that out because it's Missouri. 5 of 22 against Kentucky, 23%. So, those are their past 4 games. And so they've not shot it as well. They're not defending. Big baller Brett. I'm sorry, man. Every part of me wants to pick Ole Miss here, but the matchup just looks bad for the Rebels. So I'm going Alabama.
We have 2 kisses of death this midweek here. 2 big ones. 2 big ones.
By the way, Alabama has won. Let me look here. So Alabama has won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 straight against Ole Miss. 8 of the last 9. The last time they played in Oxford, 2022, Alabama won 97-83. The time before that, they played in Oxford, 2020. Alabama won 103-78. Ooh, that's a lot of points from the Tide in the Nate Oates era in Oxford. So,
well, Chris Beard at Ole Miss is undefeated against Alabama. So,
yeah, he hasn't played him.
It's a great point. Great point. That's a stat you're only going to find on Southeastern 14. Right there.
All right. Better chance of Alabama breaking 100 or Ole Miss pulling the upset. I would go with Alabama breaking 100.
I would go Ole Miss pulling the upset. Because I look, here's what's going to – I just said it. Let's keep this in mind. This is, like we said, this is an important game slate, and here's why. A&M and Ole Miss are in must-win situations. When teams are desperate – Max and I talk about the different spots this season, right? It's the what did we say? What were the 2 we said yesterday, Max? The team coming off a huge emotional win is going to lose.
And the midweek off.
Midweek off is going to win. Desperate. What is the desperation record this year for teams? Because we haven't got to that point. But now we're to the point to where this is desperation mode for these 2 teams right here. They're hosting 2 ranked teams. And what have we said all season? The unranked versus the ranked teams, and now you're adding desperation to the mix. I think there's a better chance of Ole Miss beating Alabama than there is Alabama scoring 100. But
okay, where does you just got your brains beat in at Kentucky by 22 points, and it was worse than that. It was almost 40 at one point. It might have been 40. And you're fighting for an SEC title. Where does that factor into the desperation index or whatever we're
that's
doing
not
here?
Desperation though.
That's not desperate, but there's a name for it. We can call it what we want, but you get my point.
All right. So how about here? All right. So let's look at it this way. Okay. Alabama on the road in SEC play, 78 points at Vanderbilt, 82 points at Mississippi State, 71 points at Tennessee, 85 points at Georgia, 81 points at Auburn, 109 at LSU, 95 at Kentucky. So, they've hit.
Yeah, I'll take back my 100 point.
And they may be without Reitzel.
Okay, this is getting a little more interesting now that we talk it through.
Yeah, I don't like how much I like Alabama. Not liking it at all.
I don't like that we all 3 picked Alabama.
I don't either. No, I don't either.
At all.
I don't understand the Ole Miss defensive thing. It is defied explanation for me. I don't get that with some of the pieces and who's coaching that team, why it has not been better.
Well, here I think it's because I still think the first half of the season, I think, set an expectation for Ole Miss that was not sustainable.
Yeah.
And it's easy to just look at the record and say, "Wow, they're 15-1." But I think the Tennessee game, we all after that game kind of said, "All right, oh boy, is this going to be a team that just is going to really struggle against the top tier teams?" And yes, they've gotten a win against Texas A&M, which looked better at the time than it does now. And they beat Mississippi State at home. They beat Florida at home. But again, this is a much different Florida team than it was back then. Yeah, it's just that the defense has not been able to hold to the level that it's needed to again, beat some of these teams. But I say that, it's also been a combination of just having – look, they played South Carolina twice, right? And against South Carolina, they've done what a lot of teams have done against South Carolina. They just hadn't been able to score enough consistently to win those games. They had that one burst in the second half at South Carolina, like we mentioned. But other than that, it's like they bogged down, in the game on Saturday. And again, really all they have over the past 3 weeks is just the holding on for dear life to beat Missouri. And so like you said, Chris, you judge teams in mid-February. What are they? I mean, yeah, this is kind of what they've been. So,
yeah, and look, I know we have our fun with computers, but the computers are trying to tell us when Ole Miss was 14-0, hey, let's pump the brakes a little bit here. And I feel like that has started to, water has sort of found its own level here.
Another thing that kind of led us astray, though, was Memphis was ranked top 10 at one point, right?
Yeah.
I thought that
Memphis isn't anywhere near the bubble.
They just fell off a cliff. So that also, I don't know, maybe was just a little bit of a smokescreen there in early December. I thought that was like a huge top 10 win, but Memphis was
it's like with Sharp too, right? He was going to be a big part of the defensively, and he's still playing, but he's not playing 6 minutes, 15 minutes, 6 minutes, not playing 7 minutes, 6 minutes. So he's not playing a lot of minutes. He's still blocking, 8 shots per minute, it seems like. But still, it's just, I will see that this is, again, the big test. I mean, this is the big one against an Alabama team that's pissed off coming in here. And basically your season's on the line for Ole Miss. And I would have to think that Chris Beard has put his team, we don't have the research right now, but I'm sure in those kind of games maybe he's had in previous, stops, he's probably done a good job of getting his team ready for those games. But Alabama's just a different beast, and we've seen the results from Ole Miss against the good offensive teams, and they have not panned out very well. So,
Real quick before we wrap up, one more reason why I think the Ole Miss defense is kind of not what we thought it was. Listen to Musa Cisse's defensive rebounding rates throughout college. Okay, I'll just go real quick. 23.7, 21.2. Last year, 28.1 was the 7th best defensive rebounder in the nation. This year, 14.6. I lost about 14% on the percentage of defensive rebounding rate from year to year. I mean, I don't know what you make of that, but
also, quickly, what about the look-ahead game? The look-ahead spot for Alabama. Tennessee coming up on Saturday. Game day. All the eyes of the country on Tuscaloosa on Saturday.
Switching my pick to Ole Miss.
Even though they're coming off the big, loss at Kentucky, and this is a bounce-back spot, everybody's talking about that game on Saturday. And
well, they're still talking about the one from last Saturday, too, and that's the reason I think Alabama won't be looking ahead.
Switching to Ole Miss officially.
All right, Big Baller Brett, there you go.
You can't help yourself, can you, Max?
I have to.
I kind of wanted to pick the two desperate teams.
Join me, Blake. Join me.
Just couldn't do it. I went with the two ranked teams on the road on Saturday. It worked out well. So I'm going to go the same formula here, although the odds tell us maybe going to flip in the other direction for this one. But we'll see.
We will be here to gloat, take our medicine, whatever applies. we have a lot of fun with this, seriously, and hope you have fun watching. Best way to watch more, hit the subscribe button, enable your notifications so you can catch us when we're on, which is just about every day. We'll be recapping this one the morning after and talking a little baseball and football. We got some football stuff planned. We just got to nail down for this week too. Hope you enjoy it all. For Blake Lovell and Max Barr, I'm Chris Lee. We are Southeastern 14, presented by Bet Online.